And good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to a special spring break edition of Ask the Theologian. I'm very glad that you have joined us. Delighted to see you wherever you are in warm and sunny spring break, probably snowing, right? And blessing to have you here. We are broadcasting 5 days this week. We'll just have 30-minute broadcasts and try to take your questions, biblical questions, worldview questions, theological questions. And with that, let's just jump right into it and see what you've got for us today. And it looks like Jeff has a question in Trinidad, Colorado. We'll take right off the bat Mark chapter 11, verse 14. Jesus curses the fig tree and uses the word ever. In fact, let's just bring it up here on our scripture, and it says, Jesus answered and said unto it, no man eat the fruit of thee hereafter forever, is the term that we're looking at right here, forever. And his disciples heard of it. Now, what Jeff is asking is the word forever. Let's find it here in the Greek here, right there in the blue. Unto Iona, ton, the age. No one of the unto, ice, into, for, ton, Iona, the age, anyone, fruit to eat, is what it says. Now, the question then is that term, ion, does it mean that it is cursed forever unto eternity? Now, it is a great question. I think, and I want you to question the assumptions on this, because there are a number of times, and Bullinger actually points this out. Let me see if I can show it to you. Bullinger in, if I can grab over here, in the Companion Bible. How's that for a big book? And I happen to have it electronically. And if you get it, you want the big one, because it is small print all the way through, and you'll need some glasses. But nonetheless, Bullinger in the Companion Bible, let me show you over on the left-hand side of the screen right here, he talks about right here forever. And what Bullinger does, which is very helpful, it doesn't have a lot of notes along the way. They are linguistic notes, Greek notes. And so what he does is he has this phrase right here on the left side of your screen, eis ton Iona, unto the age. And in his appendices, which are the best thing about the Bible, really, he speaks in Appendix 151, and we'll just go to Appendix 151. Let's see if we can get to the beginning. You notice it's rather long appendix here, but here he speaks ion, which means age, 128 times, and he analyzes it for you. And so he says, in the simple form, it is rendered age, course, world, eternal. In its prepositional phrases, it is these various issues that right here. Now, here's what we're looking for, eis ton Iona. And he says this is rendered forever in, and he gives all these passages that it's rendered forever. Or it has a negative with it sometimes, and so it's translated as never, never under the age, or ever, there's one, Hebrews 7:24, forevermore, while the world standeth. Now that's interesting. 1 Corinthians chapter 8, verse 13, wherefore, if meat make my brother to offend, I will eat no flesh while the world standeth. Now, let's just go there in the King James, and that would be 1 Corinthians chapter 8 and verse 13. And here we see, while the world standeth. Now let's look over here at the Greek, if we could. Not at all should I eat flesh, eis ton Iona. Eis ton Iona. That is the exact same phrase that not my brothers I would cause to offend, lest I make cause my brother to be offended. So, eis ton Iona in 1 Corinthians chapter 12, verse 13 is, while the world standeth. Now, you say, well, how does one phrase mean forever or while the world standeth? Doesn't make a whole lot of sense, does it? Except that, as you know, translating any language, you've got to do some contextual issue to say, what is the best way in the English language to bring that over from the Greek language? And so you take context, and it does require judgment. This is why I'm convinced that you just always have to question almost everything that's been translated and look into it. This is why I think we ought to learn to study Greek and whatnot. And the truth is that with all the tools today, a layman can do it. You've got things like the companion Bible. You've got these Greek where you can look up a phrase and you can find all of these things. But long story short, in Appendix 151 of the companion Bible, you've got them all right there, and you then can make a judgment. Now, the judgment, of course, that you have to make is we've got, again, all of these passages where eiston iona means forever. And then we've got one that means while the world stands. So I know that it can mean while the world stands. The question is, to go back to Mark chapter 1, verse 14 on the right side of your screen, what does it mean here? Hereafter, forever. No one's going to eat from this point forever. Now, I think to determine that, you need to look at the Greek, which we have done. The Greek can mean, we know definitively it can mean while this age lasts. In fact, literally, eiston iona is unto the age. So it can very definitely mean unto the end of this age, but we know there is another age to come. In fact, there's some other things that we could look at. For example, we would find in the Greek iona ton iona, from age to age. And we would see that that clearly means forever and ever and ever into all of eternity. He does not use that phrase here, unto all of eternity. So we begin to put this together in our mind, and I can tell just in Jeff's question, this is what's going on in his mind. He says, well, if no one's going to eat from it forever, what about the restoration of Israel? Aren't they going to eat of the fig tree? Isn't there going to be the blessing of the fig tree? And we see plenty of prophecies that tell us, yes, there is going to be the blessing of Israel then. So we begin to have to put this together, and I think the best thing to do is say the language does allow that it's just in this age no one is going to eat from that fruit. I think that's true. I think all of prophetic scripture aligns with that. But there is an age to come in which it's going to happen. Now, another thing that you could put together here is to recognize that the Israel that is to come is not the Israel that was. That particular Israel was not really even a sovereign independent state. It was under the authority of the Roman government and, the Pilates and the Caesars and all that kind of stuff, and even Herods, they were all sovereign over the Jewish people. And of that nation, nobody's ever going to eat from it again. It is gone. It was done in 70 A.D. And Jesus even uses this phrase, and pardon me for getting it's one of the parables where Jesus says, I will take it from this nation and give it to another nation. And that confuses people sometimes. He's talking about the blessing of the kingdom. I'll give it to another nation. That confuses people because they're saying, wait, I thought it was supposed to go to Israel. And then they interpret into another nation to say, well, this means the United States, or this means the nation of the church, which the church has never been a nation. But nonetheless, they'll do some of these things. And actually, we see and recognize that the prophetic nation of Israel is a different nation than the biblical nation of Israel, the physical biblical nation of Israel. Same Jewish people, same descendants of Abraham, no doubt about it, but physically a different nation. As a matter of fact, I would go ahead and say even modern Israel today is not the same as millennial Israel. They're going to have a completely different government. They're not going to be fraud charges and all this kind of stuff that we have in modern Israel. And modern Israel is a secular state. That's not prophetic Israel that is to come. So, of that nation, no one's ever going to have its fruits unto the age. However you take that, I think, again, it works really either way. So thank you, Jeff in Trinidad, Colorado. For that question, and appreciate that. Pastor Eric Bush in Oklahoma says, any comments on BSF, Bible Study Fellowship, that we should be leery of? Let's talk about Bible Study Fellowship for just a moment. Out of San Antonio, Texas, and of course has had a noble history in teaching Bible, mostly to ladies, but there are certainly our men's group. They've never been as strong as the ladies' groups, and always non-denominational. In fact, doggedly non-denominational. I remember when I was pastor in Pampa, Texas, there was a fairly strong Bible Study Fellowship group that BSF actually disbanded, and they disbanded not because there wasn't enough people coming to it, but because Pampa, Texas, being the size it was, did not have enough denominational variance within it, and therefore it looked like it was a Baptist fellowship, and it was disbanded by the group. Now, this has been 15, 20 years ago. So, a non-denominational, let's study the Bible for content. I think they've got a good history in that, and let's just see what the Bible said. I would obviously disagree as a local pastor on some things that do relate to denominationalism, but I understand their point, and I'm going to give them on that. As you know, have this little, I've only got a 10-pack here, Why I'm a Fundamentalist and You Should Be Too, and part of that is ecumenicalism. I'm not an ecumenicist. But let's give that point and say there is some value, and there definitely is. There is some value in believers coming together just to say, I want to know the content of the Bible. What does it say? So I'm going to give Bible Study Fellowship an A+ in their past for doing that. They came together just to know what the Bible says, not how do the Baptists interpret it and how do the Lutherans interpret it. What does it actually say? You can go home and interpret it. We want to know what it says. I think that's very valuable, and I would even say there's room in even among non-ecumenicists like me. There's room for that kind of ministry. As a matter of fact, to some degree, although not fully, to some degree, that's what our ministry tries to do, is just teach the content of the Bible. Now, here's my concern with BSF today in 2019. First of all, a number of years ago, they authorized the use, and perhaps even all of their Bible studies now, I could be wrong on this, I know they've authorized the use of the NIV, Bible translation. I don't understand how you know the content of the Bible if you're using the NIV. The NIV is very much on the realm of a dynamic equivalence in terms of Bible interpretation rather than a literal interpretation. It's a dynamic equivalence. Well, there's a lot of interpretation then, a lot of filtering that's already gone on between the Greek text and the reader. And for the purpose of knowing the content of the Bible, having that interpretation already given prior to that's a no-go for me. So there's one issue that I would be concerned with there. But the second issue I think is even more important. I began to notice a number of years ago, and again, this is probably 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago now, that BSF was getting away from their in their questions, they've got a list of questions that ladies militantly have to answer, or the men militantly have to answer every one of those questions. And they used to be Bible content questions. For example, on our previous question, eistonaion, unto the age. They would have you, use a concordance and look up every time that phrase comes about. How many times is that phrase? What are the various meanings of that phrase in the King James Bible? Yeah, it was really content based. But again, 5-10 years ago somewhere, their questions began to be feeling oriented. What do you feel about? How do you feel about? I think this is because you can't find Bible study leaders and teachers that haven't been born and bred on feelings about the Bible and feelings about God and an emotional driven Christianity. So it's, what the seminaries put out are eventually where all the ministries are going to go. And so Bible Study Fellowship today is just reaping the fruit of the seminaries that are producing the leaders for Bible Study Fellowship. So honestly, today I have serious questions about Bible Study Fellowship, whether it's any more valuable than just a group of people getting together and singing Kumbaya and saying, "What do you think about this verse?" It has lost its moorings there, its foundation. And so I think the fact that it has become a feeling-driven organization in terms of interpretation of the Bible is a huge thing to be leery of there. And that would be my word on Bible Study Fellowship. Let me go ahead and just give a disclaimer. It's been 4 or 5 years since I have looked at any of the actual material of Bible Study Fellowship. Dan has a question on YouTube related to Daniel chapter 9. Can you please explain what it means to make an end of sin in Daniel chapter 9 and I believe that's verse 24. Daniel chapter 9, verse 24. What does it mean to make an end of sin? Won't there still be sin in the millennium? Good thought there. So let's take a look at Daniel chapter 9, verse 24, and see if we can put a little help to that. Dan, thank you. 70 weeks are determined upon thy people and upon thy holy city, the Jewish people, the city of Jerusalem, to finish the transgression and to make an end of sins, plural. Let's check this out, just make sure. Yes, we do have plural there in the Hebrew as well. To make an end of sins and to make reconciliation for iniquity and to bring in everlasting righteousness and to seal up the vision and prophecy and to anoint the most holy place. Now, Dan has this great question. Won't there still be sin in the millennium? And there will still be sin in the millennium. We know that because a man of 100 years old, if he has not submitted himself to the lordship of the King, King Jesus, the Messiah, then he's going to lose his life. We see at the end of the millennium of course, the battle of Gog and Magog, that's spoken of in the book of Revelation, in which many turn away. So there is sin or sins in this regard, and yet here we have to make an end of sin. Now, to determine here what has happened, I want to look at the issue here. Okay, it does look like, I was looking at the New American Standard 924. Okay, so the reason Dan has make an end of sin is because there are some manuscripts that have sin singular and others that have sins plural. Let's just give it there and say it's okay. It doesn't matter either way. But there are some manuscript differences there. And I think it's the Latin Vulgate, perhaps. Yeah, that's what it looks like. The Hebrew always seems to be plural, but the Latin is singular. Why New American Standard and some of the others went with the singular from the Latin rather than the plural with the Hebrew? I don't know. That's why I use the King James Version. But make an end of sin or make an end of sins. The Hebrew term there, hatham, is the term for make an end of. And that is what we want to look at here to see exactly what it means. If we can take a look at this, and maybe I can, okay. I'm going to bring back up on the screen. On the left-hand side of your screen, you see there's 27 times this particular word. It's Hebrews 28:56, I believe it is, and 27 times that it is used, and it looks like most of the time it is to seal up, and to seal up sin, and only here. In fact, looks like it's used twice here in this verse. Let's see, to make an end of sin, to bring in, yeah, and down here, and to seal up vision and prophecy. So we've got actually the same word in, let's see, that's, see if it's all the same. Okay, exact same construction. That it is used here, to make an end or to seal up. And even in Daniel chapter 12, verse 4, seal up the book even unto the time of the end. You've got, again, a lot of these, and most of them are sealed up. So here's my hunch, Dan, and I think you've got a very good question that is worthy of some further study. Because you are exactly right. There is sin or sins in the millennium. So the question we would want to say is, what does this word hatham mean? To seal up sins. So at the end of the 70 week, sins are going to be sealed up. Perhaps this actually means that there's no more question about whether a person is what's the term I'm looking for? Let me back up. In our day, if a person sins, they often are not immediately punished by it, and if the sins are sealed up, however, there's a judgment really already given for those sins. So the end is the judgment that has been provided. That man's going to die at 100 years old. It's taken care of there. Or at the end, going to be thrown into the lake of fire. So my hunch is we're not completely understanding the Hebrew here. In fact, if you look in the Young's literal translation, again, it says to shut up transgressions and to seal up sins and cover iniquity. So I think the question is, what does it mean to seal up sins? And that's where we would have to look up to try to figure that out. But you bring about a very good point, Dan, and that is that when something doesn't align, because we know there's going to be sin, so how can it end? It's either a dispensational problem or a translation problem. And here I think we've got a translation problem. Pastor Allen in Georgia, what's your opinion about the New King James Version? Do you consider it an accurate and reliable translation? I certainly hold to the superiority of the majority text. I do think that the value in the New King James is that it goes upon the majority text, or the Textus Receptus, and so I appreciate that. I think the flaws with the New King James are twofold. One is that it does not carry the older English pronouns, thee and thy. I know it sounds like modernization, but the problem is we need those to know the persons. Is it singular or is it plural? So I wish they would at least put a little, superscript P or something for a plural, or superscript S. I understand modern English. If you want it in modern English, you can't use thee and thy. And so this is what they've tried to do, but I think that's deficient in it. And so I'd rather put my big boy pants on and go ahead and use the King James and help the people of the congregation to do that too. And my experience is they're able to learn pretty quickly if you teach them why are we saying thee and thy and thine and all these ancient pronouns. Secondly, and I don't have a particular illustration to give here, but I have noticed in flipping back and forth, you'll notice on my Bible software, I keep King James as default, but I have a New King James right there. And so I look back and forth often, and I have noticed that there are a number of places in which I just don't think the New King James is as accurate as the King James, as precise as the King James. So I'm going to give it a number 2. If you don't want to use King James, go with New King James, but I like King James better. How's that? So we're almost out of time. 30 minutes flies quickly, doesn't it? Bob Picard says, was there a switch from Tuesday to Monday this week? No, this is a special. We'll be on Tuesday as well, and Wednesday and Thursday and Friday this week, and carry that out. But let's take one more question that comes here, and that is, do you think 1948 is the real coming back to the land of, let me reword that question there, but is 1948 the fulfillment of the return to Israel? The return of the Jewish people? I don't think so. I think 1948 is the creation of the modern state of Israel, but it really is pretty hard to determine, is it on May 13th, you didn't have the modern state of Israel, May 14th, you did have the modern state of Israel, and so you start counting there. But in May 14th, 1948, they did not possess the city of Jerusalem. That was until June, was it 5th, 1967. And so I would think that you would have to include Jerusalem in the fulfillment of owning the land. But even in June of 1967, there were still a vast majority of the Jewish people that lived other places and not in Israel. So is that really a fulfillment? I really think rather than pinpointing some of these modern dates and even the modern nation of Israel, what we see beginning in about 1897 is the beginning of the fulfillment of the return of the Jewish people. I think even the modern state of Israel today is only a foreshadow of things that are to come. And it gives every evidence that God is doing exactly what he said he was going to do, and that is the bones began to rattle. And maybe in 1948, some flesh was put on the bones, but we still don't have, in Ezekiel 38 and 39, we haven't come to the point where life is breathed into them. That's going to come later. That's going to be a theocratic nation of Israel, by the way. And so I certainly think that 1948 and all that is brought about there is certainly part of prophecy. I don't think it's the fulfillment of prophecy. I think there's so much more to go into the future. I do think that it should be celebrated both biblically as the easiest indicator of what God is doing in 1948 and 1967 is just to say, wow, God is absolutely being true to his word. I think it should be celebrated biblically. I also think it should be celebrated politically, by the way, because Israel is the only real friend we have in the Middle East down through the decades. Israel is the only democracy. Israel is the only place of free enterprise. Israel is the only place of freedom of education. Israel is the only place of freedom of religion. It's the only place that I could go and freely distribute Bibles, distribute gospel tracts, and proclaim my religion. I can't do any of that in any of the neighbors. I think economically, medically, technologically, politically, and religiously, every reason to support Israel. Is it the fulfillment of prophecy? I think it's only part of the fulfillment of prophecy that is given through there. Well, thank you through all of that. I've got a number of questions that begin with Bruce's question about Billy Graham and Beth's question about 2 Samuel 24. And she might give us, I'll go ahead and look at this. Beth talks about King James versus New King James, he versus he. The New King James, it's a good point. Back to my others, I talked about the pronouns. New King James also does the capitalization of pronouns, and it is so easy to get the wrong interpretation of those capitalizations that I do prefer the King James, which just says we're going to put a lowercase h and let you decide. I think that's a better way to go than to say strangers from someplace, somewhere. I don't even know who they are or where they were or when they did it or what their thinking was. They determined this for me. I think that we ought to just do like the King James and leave that through there. So all of these other questions then that come about with Beth and Bruce and perhaps some others, we are going to put those on the agenda for this week and catch up. But our half hour is over. My goodness, how fast a half hour goes. But we'll be back tomorrow morning, 10 a.m. Mountain Time, and Wednesday, and Thursday, and Friday, and it'll be a glorious day. And I will see you at randywhiteministries.org. We always appreciate it when you like our Facebook page, and we love it when you go to dispensationalpublishing.com and you buy something and are a blessing to the ministry indirectly through that. And until next time, I'm Dr. Randy White. It's been wonderful to be with you on this Monday morning. God bless you.